So hey there, we're going to get started here in just a minute. We're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, which is about emails, in particular about emails that delight, emails that your audience looks forward to and wants to open and read. Before we get started though, just a little bit of quick housekeeping. As y'all know, you want to make sure you have all other streaming devices turned off. So if you've got Google, Spotify, Netflix, or any of those things running right now, turn them off so you have the maximum available bandwidth. Make sure you've got all those extra tabs closed if you're like me and you usually have 42 open at one time. We are going to have enough time at the end for questions. So if you have some around email and writing emails for your audience, hold those to the end and we'll dive into those. You can always go ahead and type those questions into the chat roll. It's just I'm not going to stop to answer them until we've gone through the basics here first. So let me know if everybody can hear and has any trouble with the sound or the image quality here. So type in if you have any trouble with the sound. Otherwise, I'm going to dive right on in. Awesome, Virginia. Thank you. So let me share the screen here and we're going to go over to, oops, almost clicked the wrong button there. We're going to go over to the presentation. So we're going to be talking today about emails that delight, emails that convince your reader to open them before they've even done more than see the subject line. So you want to create emails that they want to open. A lot of us worry about emailing as often as you really should because you're worried about bothering people. Well, if you know you're writing the emails that your peeps want to read, you won't be bothering them and you won't have to have that concern. So one of the ways that you make sure that you're writing those emails that delight is you move away from a form of email that a lot of people use. And I know some of you have heard me say this before, but don't send out newsletters. Now, I know FASO calls their email system the newsletter system. That's fine. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is an overly designed, almost kind of magazine template for an email that goes out once a month. That's the way that I was taught to do email when I first started doing it 15 years ago. And that was the done thing at the time, but it doesn't work anymore for a variety of reasons. What will create an email that delights instead is a more personalized email that reads like a letter, a one-on-one note to a family member or a friend. So the big difference between what I want y'all to do, which is write personalized email, and what a lot of other people do, which is they send newsletters, is the personalized email is more one-to-one, not one-to-many. One-to-one, not one-to-many. It's about them, it's not about you. And yeah, you can still talk about yourself in the email, but it needs to be in terms of what they're interested in, what delights them. Not simply a listing or recitation of all your accolades from the month. That's what people tend to do. That is about as interesting as watching paint dry on a fence post. Don't do that. You won't stand out when you do that. Nobody needs to read a listing of your awards. They're interested in you as an artist. They're interested in your journey as an artist, wherever it is that you are right now. So you're inviting them along on your journey. They're now your pen pal. And you want to send that one-on-one email to them, and you want to invite them to send emails back to you. Engagement. So I'm still getting over my cold, so I want to make sure I stay hydrated so I don't lose my voice anywhere along in here, because this is something I get excited about. So in sending that more one-on-one type of email, there are two different ways that you can do that, two different types of emails. They're still one-to-one, it's just they have two different kinds of formats, and they might be called different things in different email systems. The first is the most normal kind. It's your broadcast. It's your weekly email. And in some systems, it's called a broadcast. In some, it's called a campaign. The term doesn't really matter. It just means that you're writing an email a week, basically, that goes out to your whole email list. And there are ways to personalize it within that system so that it's addressed to their first name and it doesn't read like it's going to 400 or 1,000 people. Those don't have to be batched ahead of time. They can be, you can write them each week, or you can write all 4 for the month at the beginning of the month and schedule them out. Almost every system out there, certainly MailChimp and the FASO email system, will allow you to schedule emails so that you can batch them and then have them set for the rest of the month. I do recommend emailing once a week, not once a month, not twice a month, but each week. The problem with once a month is people have forgotten who you are. By the time 4 weeks goes by, you remember to email. And it used to be people didn't get that many emails. Now their inboxes are filled on a daily basis. So if you wait to send an email once a month, they're going to forget who you are, and they might even forget that they signed up for your email list and mark it as spam. That's a horrible thing. You want to keep them aware of who you are and what you're doing and entertain them throughout the month. It means that also, if you're only emailing once a month, you're liable to forget and then think about it the day before and go, oh shoot, I'm supposed to send an email, and then run to create an email and do kind of a half job on it. Don't want you to do that. The second type of email is a sequence or automation. Now, some systems really can't do automations yet, and I don't think FASOs can do much on the automation and beyond the welcome email. But all systems will do the welcome email, and we're going to talk about that more in the presentation. But a sequence or automation is a series of emails, even if it's just one, like the welcome email, that is, excuse me, let people opt into what they get when they opt into your email list. It's a special series of emails. Didn't think I was going to start hacking. The broadcast is the weekly one. The sequence is the specialized one, like the welcome email. If you're on MailChimp and you're on the paid system, you can do automations, which means that you can send a welcome email and then 1 or 2 follow-up emails after that before people start getting the broadcast emails. Welcome email, no matter what system you're on, goes out first, and then they are subscribed to the broadcasts. So that welcome email needs to be something that kind of wraps them in a big hug and lets them know that they're in the right place. All of those emails, whether they're a sequence or whether they're a broadcast, need to incorporate the power of story. That's the secret sauce. That's what I call story selling, not just storytelling, but story selling. Story has tremendous deep psychological power. Story unblocks the barriers to human connection. When somebody tells you a story, you connect on a deeper level than if you just have a conversation or if you just listen to them make a speech. You want to connect on that deep level and build relationships. So story first unlocks the barriers to connection, and then it allows you to build a relationship, and then it sells subconsciously. And it sells through building that ongoing connection. And if you're doing a good enough job in story and in using story, you truly don't have to sell, because you get people excited about coming with you on the journey and about what you're doing with your work long before you ever offer something for sale. That's the power of story. It's truly a remarkable tool that all of us have. Now, some people, when they hear that, think that I mean they have to go write the next great American novel. That's not what I mean at all. Story can be as complex as Anna Karenina, and it can be as simple as Little Red Riding Hood. It doesn't have to be an 800-page novel. It doesn't have to have quirks and turns and dramatic episodes. But what it does have to have are some key core elements that help to unlock those barriers. And what those elements are, these are the parts of story. It's just a basic outline. You've actually probably written this way before. You just didn't think about it as being a story. First part of a story is the hook. It's the thing that draws people in. A lot of times you find the hook in the subject line on an email or in the headline of a blog post. Second thing, you go through 3 points. I wouldn't do more than 3 because it gets too complicated. But if you have point 1, point 2, point 3, you're leading them down the line of what happened. And we're going to talk about topics for those stories in just a minute. But you go from hook, the thing that pulls them in and grabs their attention, the pattern interrupt, and you go through 3 points that lead them to a close, to a basic idea. 3 points around your idea. Then that close, and I don't mean closing a sale, but I mean wrapping up, coming to a conclusion. Then delivering a call to action. And here's why that's important. The close is important because people don't like stories without an ending. They want to know what happens. So you've got to come to an end with the story you're telling and then give people something to do. That's what the call to action is. And in some stories, you can open another loop up, which means open with another part of a story that gets them excited about reading the next email. If you've ever watched Lost or 24 Hours, you'll know what I'm talking about. You know how they always end on a cliffhanger. Or think about soap operas. They always end on a cliffhanger. Well, you don't have to have a cliffhanger in your regular weekly broadcast, but you do need to come to a close. So you need to kind of wrap things up before you then give a call to action. That call to action doesn't have to be go buy my stuff. In fact, it should not be go buy my stuff every week. Because if you're always pounding your audience with go buy my stuff, they're going to tune you out. But you do want to train them to take action in your email. You want to train them to click a link. Those links could go to your social media. It could go to your website, to an image of a painting that you just finished, not necessarily for sale, but one that you just finished. It could go to an article on another website. For example, if your big thing that you're interested in, your mission, is to reconnect people to the landscape and help preserve the landscape, you might send them to a link to, say, a national park or an article about the importance of the landscape, something that connects back to your art practice. And what that does is it gets them used to clicking a link without feeling like every time they click a link, they're going to be going to something that's for sale. Does that make sense? Y'all let me know if that makes sense to you, that you're trying to train people to click links and there's not a whole lot of risk involved to them. You're not asking them to do great big things and spend a lot of money, but it gets them used to the idea of clicking so that when you do have something for sale, it doesn't feel scary to them to click the link. So one of the things you could do your hook, your 3 points, you could bring that to a close, and you could continue the story on your website, and you could have them click the link to follow the rest of the story on your website. That would be an example of a low risk click. So you want to keep it Really simple and low risk most of the time, except when you're getting to the point we've got something for sale. And a good rule of thumb is jab, 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 right hook. And I know some of y'all have heard me talk about that before. I get that from Gary Vaynerchuk, who says you should deliver good content 3 times before you ask for anything back. That means you give good stuff before you ask for a sale or a purchase. So I would not do any big promotions more than once a month or once every 4 emails. Now, is that a hard and fast rule? No, not at all. But it's just a good rule of thumb. Same rule applies to social media posts. Jab, 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 right hook. You don't want to always ask people to go buy your stuff. It becomes redundant and obnoxious. Yes, Kathy, absolutely. The link could be to the blog. So if you start off a story, I have a story that I tell on my website on a blog post, and I wrote it 5 or 6 years ago, and it's how to fall in love with where you are. And it goes through the story of my being frustrated with not being able to paint or not being able to be on the coast, that I was stuck living in the Midlands, 100 miles away from the coast, not where I wanted to be. I was stuck doing administrivia, and I didn't have as much time to paint. So I could set that story up with point 1, point 2, point 3, and I could kind of draw a part of that to the close, and I could say, if you'd like to hear how I solved that problem, click here to go to my website. And they could then go and read the rest of the blog post on the website. Beverly says the only person that she's seeing in the chat screen is Virginia. And the reason for that is that some people have not switched to all panelists and attendees. So make sure that you have switched the little blue button down at the bottom of the chat roll from all panelists to all panelists and attendees. So there's only one person that's just panelist right now. Everybody else is on panelists and attendees. So you should be seeing Joan and Virginia and Beverly and Sharon. If you don't, either you joined after they made their comment, or there's something wrong with the chat. So make sure you can see more than one person's comment in there. Make sure you switch that button from all panelists to all panelists and attendees. Also, Mike, very good. So Mike says he's here, Mern's here, Sharon's here. So make sure you see all those others. Make sure you switch the button to all panelists and attendees. I forgot to remind everybody about that at the beginning. Thank you, Sharon and Beverly, for pointing that out. So those are the parts of the story. I want you to remember that you don't have to say, you don't have to create the next great novel. You just are trying to create a little story because it lets down the guard and lets you make that connection. Think about when you go to a party and you're meeting new people, you tell a little story about yourself. And that's probably one of the first stories that you should share with your followers. It's what we're going to talk about for the welcome email. Now, when you're thinking about what to put in those emails, obviously the first thing is the story of your paintings. But not every email has to be about a particular painting. Your content categories for both your emails and your blog posts as well should go around these 3 key areas. At the core, this center part, this is your art practice. And absolutely, Mern, it's okay if the story's already one on your website. You're going to link to that. So the 3 categories, you want to challenge people's preconceptions and beliefs. So if people believe, for example, that they can't afford art, that's one of the things you want to challenge. If people believe they don't have enough room to hang paintings in their house, that's something you want to challenge. Connection posts, connection emails, that has to do with identity, because you probably share a whole lot identity-wise with your audience. For example, The audience for my artwork tends to be people who love the landscape, people who really strongly believe in the preservation of the landscape. And I can talk about that. I can talk about the importance of it. I can talk about a new area that they might not be aware of and why that's important to preserve. I can talk about why I love the light and the color, because that's probably also something my audience shares. So think about all of the different things that you share with your audience and that can help to build that connection. Third category is to educate. And this is the one that's overused, way overused. All too often, what I see happen, especially with artists, is that as they write their emails, they start trying to educate people about all the techniques that they use. And the truth is, collectors don't want to necessarily know what size brush you used. They really don't care about the difference between hot press and cold pressed watercolor paper. They do get interested in your process. They do want to understand your process, but they don't need to know the intricacies of it. So make sure when you're writing educational posts, educational emails, that they're targeted to collectors and not other artists. Make sure that the majority of your posts are not educational. Let me repeat that. The majority of your posts, your emails, should not be educational. They need to be more connection. They need to be about how that person that you're writing to connects to your work and your art practice. So Byrne says, is it okay if the story is one already on my website? Absolutely. The example I just used was about one that's already on my website. I wrote it 5 years ago. How to fall in love with where you are. And it's about being frustrated about being where you are, wanting to be someplace else, and learning that when you look closely at the place you are, you can fall in love with it. And that's a timeless piece on my website. I can send people to that over and over and over again. It's also a good one for the welcome email. So it's not a problem if it's something that's on your website. Excuse me, not at all. Okay, there's 2 different email types. The 2 different types are your weekly broadcast email and your welcome email, your sequence. So your broadcast emails, the ones that you do each week, they don't have to necessarily connect to each other. They can be very self-contained. Your story doesn't have to go from week to week to week to week. You can write about all kinds of different things. In fact, we're going to have a series of prompts for you. Once we put the replay up, there are going to be 3 things there for you in PDF form inside the membership. Number 1 is a list of prompts for ideas for emails for you to send to your audience. Number 2 is a template that you can use for a broadcast email, your weekly broadcast email. Number 3 is a template for your welcome email, because that's super important. And even on FAFSA, you can change what's on there. You can personalize it, make it more your own. So I want you to make sure that you check back in when the replay gets posted and that you download those PDFs, because that's part of this month's challenge. I want everybody to write an email, and I want everybody to personalize the welcome email on your system so that it's a little bit better than the generic MailChimp or FAFSA. Hey, welcome to my email list. Or you have subscribed to Mary Gilgerson's email list. That's not really very exciting. So for that weekly broadcast email, you want to tell a story. You want to talk about your art practice in some way, shape, or form. You can go back and relate it to any of those things around those 3 categories that I talked about just now. It could be around shifting some of their beliefs. It could be around connection or it could be around how to. Make sure it always links back to your art practice, to what you do as an artist. Don't post random stuff, either to your blog, your email, or social media. I see people do that all too often. You don't want to post random stuff about what you had for breakfast or the new kitten that you just got, unless you tie it back to your art practice. Always tie it back to your art practice. So for that weekly broadcast email, see if I can pull one up. I wanted to show y'all an example of one that I have used. Shoot. Let me get to that spot. I thought I had it pulled up and I don't. Let me grab that really quick. Do a little quick search here. And I think this is what I'm thinking about. Yep. So let me share the screen here for a minute. So this one was actually kicking off a new collection too. So this is, I called it The Scent of the Low Country, which was the title of the painting, and also kind of kicking off a new series of paintings. So I use this format. Each email, regular broadcast email, there's a painting at the top. Notice there's no fancy color back here. Do not use those fancy newsletter templates that are in both MailChimp and in Fasto. It is a problem for deliverability. And I don't think I mentioned that earlier, I meant to. But if you've got a really complex newsletter template that has multiple images and colored backgrounds, it's going to be really hard for that email to end up in the inboxes of people who are on Gmail, Yahoo, Hotmail, or any of those other big accounts, because it goes into their spam filters. Because over the years, those systems have learned that things that have multiple images in there, things that are newsletter format, tend to be spam. They tend to be promotional. You don't want to go in there. You want it to look more like a regular personal email. So I have the artwork at the top. I have the title. I get the size and the medium. And then I go into the story. And that's it. I talk about the story. If they click that link right there, it takes them to the website and they can read the story of the painting. And if they click on the painting, it goes to that same point on the website. So I'm letting them know that there's a new collection coming, and when the collection release is, and that because they're on my email list, they get the VIP access. That you're not going to be always releasing a collection, but that link down there could go to whatever you wanted. It could be would love to have you follow me on social media. In fact, that's what's on the template that I'm going to be giving to y'all. So think about how you can create a basic format that you're going to use over and over and over again. Mern says, is it okay if the story is, I already answered that one. So if I refer to a still life with fruit or flowers, what would be a good hook that's not too educational? So think about what I've got right here. Now that ended up being the title of the painting, The Scent of the Low Country. The subject line in the email was the scent of mud. Now, does that sound intriguing? It had a high open rate. And part of the reason it had a high open rate is people are going, the smell of mud? They want to know why. So the good hook is something that leaves people going, what? Why? So that they want to open it. You don't want to be too clickbaity. You know, clickbait is that the kind of stuff that says, man has 4 heads and 2 arms. Click here to read more. You don't want to be like that, but you want to have something that's intriguing, that leads to curiosity. So think about making people curious. So the scent of mud makes people curious. The scent of the Low Country is the scent of mud. Kathy says, so we're talking about what intrigued us to want to paint it, then what emotion or feeling it results in. Yeah, that's the story of the painting. Who, what, where, when, why, and how. Think about the basics of good journalism is who, what, where, when, why, and how. Answer that. Now, you don't have to answer all of that, but try to hit 3 of them and give people an idea, things they can connect to. And that's going to be intriguing enough to make people want to open it. So if you look at the body of this email, now the template I've got for y'all is a variation on this particular email. And it started off by saying, I've always relaxed to let my breath out a notch when I get back to the Low Country and I can smell the rich, earthy aroma of the mud. And then I tell a little more intimate story that everybody in my large and extended family on the island said puff mud when I was growing up. And I didn't hear pluff mud, which is the actual name, until I lived in Charleston. So the L wasn't the only thing my family has dropped. So I'm adding in a little bit of backstory on myself. So that the pluff mud, and then I tell them what pluff mud is. And then I say, if you hold the Low Country in your heart, it's the smell of coming home. Now, a question I could ask at the end of that in the PS would be, so what smell tells you that you're going home or that you've come home? So you're connecting to them on that very deep emotional level. You're involving the senses, the 5 senses in some way. Maybe not all of them, but at least 2 or 3 of them. So any of y'all that are from the Low Country know what pluff mud smells like. It stinks to most people. It's the smell of home to me. It's that smell from the mud of decaying matter that kind of is oozy and gooey and rich and stinky. So what is it about the subject that you paint that is oozy and gooey and rich and stinky that you can hook into? So does that make sense, Kathy? You want to talk about the stuff that's on an emotional connected level. That's what draws in. People buy based on emotion and they justify it based on logic. So that emotional connection is super, super, super important. Do y'all see how this does not look like a newsletter, that AKA newsletter? It looks more like an email that I've sent to a friend. Don't put more than 1 image in there. Every extra image you put in cuts your deliverability rate because it begins to look more and more like a promotion. Keep it super, super simple. Notice it's not real long. People don't read emails that go on forever because I don't have my phone with me right here, but most people are reading their emails on their phone. And if they have to scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll, they're not going to do it. So keep it short and sweet. Build some emotional connection, get in there and get out. Really good idea to use the PS. I'm going to show you that in the welcome email in just a second too. But people tend to jump right down to the PS and then come back up and read the rest of the email. I don't know why they do that, but they do. And so you want to put the call to action. I generally put the call to action down there in the PS. So that's the broadcast email. The other email that we're going to talk about is your welcome email. Now, each system does this a little bit differently, but you can go in and personalize that welcome email in each and every system that's out there. So you can do it in FASO, you can do it in MailChimp, you can do it in ActiveCampaign, you can do it in ConvertKit or any of the other systems that are out there. And what the reason to do that is that it's going out anyway. You're going to get more bang for the buck if you engage that person the very first time they get that email. Almost everybody opens the welcome email. And if you have something that's meaningful in there, they're going to open your second email as well. So you can dramatically build the engagement with your list through what you do in that welcome email. So let's look at an example here. This is the template, basic template that I'm going to be giving y'all. And see if I can make that fit the format here a little bit better. There, that'll work. And switch the screen so you can see it. So in your welcome email, the first thing that they're going to see is the subject line. Remember, that's your hook. And if it's something other than welcome to my email list, you're going to stand out right away. Or just welcome. You don't want it to be that. So the subject line I'm going to suggest is that you do something like, welcome, I'm on a mission, ... Because people are going to be, again, curious to open that up. And all of y'all are on a mission with your art. What is it that drives you to paint what you paint? We talked about that last month in talking about how you would define success. So what is it that's driving you to make the stuff that you make? So welcome, I'm on a mission, ... And then in your body of your email, hey, I put hey Jane because that's just a more generic name, but your email system can personalize that. It's going to be different. Oh, I'm sure there are plenty of typos in there, Virginia. I haven't run spell check on it. They're going to, your system can put their name in there. It's going to be a little bit different way to do it depending on the system. So double check on that, but have it addressed to the specific person. And you want to say, thank you for subscribing and following along on my painting journey. So you want to thank them first off for joining you on in your painting practice, being a part of it. Then you fill in the blank of what you're on a mission to do. I'm on a mission, and this is what I'm on a mission to do. I'm on a mission to bring you the experience of the color and light of the southern landscape. Then you could insert your mission and why. What is it that's driving you to paint? And then I say, I'll be sharing that journey with you 2 to 3 times a week, or however often you're going to be emailing. So I email my list generally, my painting list, more than once a week, 2 to 3 times. Let them know how often you're going to be getting in contact with them so that it's really clear up front. I would not recommend emailing every day. There's a time when you could do that and people appreciated it. At this point, I think it's a little overkill, but you can definitely email once or twice a week. But at this point, at least once a week. I'm preaching. Y'all see me preaching. Then the next paragraph I say, in capturing that experience in a painting, I feel like I'm helping to preserve my little corner of the universe. And I do feel like that if I capture, for example, the wildlife refuge that's just outside of Savannah in a painting, I can make other people fall in love with it enough to see how important it is to preserve it. That's my why. Then I could say something like, is that important to you too? Chances are your why is important to them or they wouldn't have subscribed. Then I ask them to hit reply. That's an important thing to do in your welcome email. Again, it trains them to do something every time they get their email. And it says, I'd love for you to hit reply and let me know what the outdoors, particularly your corner of the universe, means to you. And here's where that's really, really, really powerful. When I first started sending emails 40 million years ago, I didn't really understand that hit reply button. And I didn't take advantage of it. In fact, I thought it was really weird when people hit reply and responded to my emails. I would think to myself, don't they know this is an email list? It's a broadcast. It's going to a couple hundred people. Why are they hitting reply? You want them to do that. And then at least while your email list is small, you want to respond to their replies because that builds that relationship. It took me a long time to realize that. I was pretty stupid when I started out. I missed some big opportunities there. Even with my list being big now, I still try to hit reply when people take the time out of their day to respond to something I've sent out. 99.99% of the time, the people who are buying something are the people I've responded to. So it's just good sales. It's just good people skills. It's good relationship building. So if you can get them into the habit of hitting reply or clicking a link right from the very beginning, you're going to be so much further along than 90% of the rest of the artists out there who are not doing this, who are not personalizing their welcome email, who are not thinking about the overall strategy of email. So then I end it with, thanks again for joining me, Mary. Don't sign it with your first name and your last name. That begins to be too professional. Remember, this is a one-to-one email, a one-to-one letter. And then think about, again, how important the PS is. So you could send them to a blog post. I could send them to that blog post I wrote about falling in love with where you are. I could send them to a blog post that describes my overall painting process. In this case, in this template, I'm suggesting that they go and follow me on social media. So if you end up using this template, if you'd like to connect on social media as well, you can find me here on Facebook and over here on Instagram. And you want to make those clickable links so that they follow you on social media. That's a pretty easy ask. And one of the reasons that you want people on social media as well as your email list is that they're not likely to see it on all platforms. And if they miss it on one platform, then they'll catch it on the other. So you're not going to be bombarding them too much. So don't worry about that. So it's relatively easy, as I said, to go in and change that welcome email. You could do that in FASO on the back end in your newsletter system. It allows you to edit the welcome email. You can do that in MailChimp as well. So I want to make sure I have time for questions here for just a little bit. And I think we've got about 5 or 10 minutes here where we can y'all can ask some questions. And just a quick reminder that the templates will be with the replay and the prompts for some just general broadcast emails as well. Good questions coming in here. So let me stop sharing the screen here. So, question from Kathy. She says, is it okay to list all the social media links at the bottom of your newsletter? I would not do that. And I want y'all to get out of the habit of calling it a newsletter. So call it your broadcast email. And here's the reason you don't want to always have those links down at the bottom. You pretty much want to have one call to action in each email. One thing that you're asking them to do. And if you've got the social media links at the bottom of each and every email, it gets a little confusing. So I would send them to follow you on social media maybe once a month, but not on every email. That gets to be a little bit too much. No, I know it's in the footer on a lot of people's emails. Don't do that. Keep it simple. Do you put your social media links in the bottom of your emails to your friends? And the answer is no, not every last one of them. But you might occasionally send an email to your friends and say, I'd love for you to follow me on social media. Here are the links. So make it as much like a one-to-one, friend-to-friend email as possible. The only things that should be in the footer are the things that you're required by law to have in there. And that has to do with the physical address and the unsubscribe option. Other than that, don't put other stuff in the footer. It's just distracting. Sally says, do you put in your hardships in painting? Tell me more what you mean by hardships in painting there, Sally. So let me know more about that. So Virginia says, I'm on FASO and MailChimp, so I'm not sure which platform responds to my join my list. You should be able to see that in the back end of FASO, Virginia. It depends on whether you have linked MailChimp into FASO. MailChimp integrates directly into FASO. So if you haven't done that yet, that's your next step. It's just basically clicking a link and connecting the two together. And when you do that, then all of the forms that are on your FASO website that say join my list will connect to your MailChimp list. So they tie together like this. That's one of the reasons I recommend MailChimp, is it really tightly integrates with FASO. So the way to check that is on the back end of your FASO website. Look in your mail newsletter section, and you should be able to tell whether you've integrated MailChimp or not. Painting struggles. Sally, by and large, no. Here's why. You want to talk about your painting struggles if it's something that your audience can connect with. If it's about struggling with, I'm going to use an example, painting waves, no. Because that's not a struggle they share. It needs to be a struggle that they share, or else it's about you and not about them. So I don't think that's, it's a distraction, and it doesn't take them where you want them to go. You can talk about your struggles if it's something they can connect to. So go back to the struggle I had with having enough time to paint and with not being where I wanted to be. So do you think there are people in my audience who are, and your audience too, who are living where they don't want to be, or frustrated with where they're living, not being able to get to the place they want to be? And the answer is yeah. So when I talk about that, they can connect to that. And then when I talk about the process of looking at where they are now every day begins to make them fall in love with where they are, that's something that helps other people too. Yeah, Virginia, you're missing the Hudson Valley is exactly the same thing. Precisely what I'm talking about. But struggling to paint waves or whatever else the subject is, no, that's not something everybody's going to share a connection to. So you want to talk about, you could talk about the struggles to paint waves in connection with a painting that's a success. You could have a painting of waves that is just stellar, and you could talk about, I really worked hard for a year to get a painting of waves that satisfies me. Here's what I think works in this one, and then talk about that. But sharing our struggles with a particular topic or a particular kind of paint, that's more of an art tips list kind of email. That goes into what I was talking about with the how-to. That is not pertinent to your audience. So always think about who your audience is. I've got a client that I'm going to have to put my pointy shoes on with, because she's writing to 2 audiences on one email list. People who are potential painters and people who are potential buyers of paintings. And it's confusing. People don't know who that's actually addressed to. So make sure you're speaking directly to your audience and what they are interested in, what their needs, hopes, and desires are. So I hope that's clear. Only talk about painting struggles when they connect to universal people struggles. And there are ways to do that, but you got to make that universal people connection there. So let me make sure I've gotten the other questions that came in. Anything else? Keep in mind, intrigue. You want to use curiosity. You don't have to, again, with your headline or your hook, it doesn't have to be earth-shattering. It just needs to be intriguing. It needs to make them curious. I did something in a headline and a subject line about a month ago, and I flipped around I played with synesthesia, the idea that one sense can appeal to another sense. And so my subject line was the taste of cobalt blue. And y'all know, especially that I'm not painting an actual cobalt blue, but the color cobalt blue. And that I'm not proposing that everybody go eats their paint, but that there's a taste and a smell associated with the color. And that's intriguing and curiosity inducing. And so the open rate for that email was really high. A lot of people clicked through to go read the blog post. So that's what I mean by using curiosity and a hook. So yeah, I think the Hudson Valley would be a great place for you to talk about, Virginia. Sally, I think talking about the mountains, because that's your other place. That's where y'all go. And talking about what that connection means to you is something that you should do in your emails. So any other questions? Got time for one last question if anybody has one. If not, I want to remind everybody, the challenge for this month, I want you to start writing your broadcast emails. Ideally, I want to challenge everybody to write one a week. Second thing I want to challenge everybody to do is go in there and personalize your welcome email. Take advantage of the fact that it's an automation that everybody who subscribes to your list is going to get. It's your introduction. And that way you can grab people the very first moment they subscribe to your list, and they're more likely to open your second email. Kathy says, what did I miss in the first two slides? Basics is fine. I'm going to put the slides up there in the replay as well, Kathy. It's pretty simple. I'll share those screens for you. So first one's just the title, and the second one was think about personalized email versus the newsletter format. That's a big important point, but you're writing one-to-one emails to a friend rather than a broadcast to thousands. That newsletter format tends to be, I'm writing to all of y'all out there, whereas a personalized email is I'm writing to you, an individual. A lot of times, if you've done it well, people don't realize that you are sending a broadcast email. They think you're doing one-to-one emails. Mern says, what do you think of including a small picture of yourself with a paintbrush in hand in the welcome email? Absolutely. So I'm in the process of redoing my welcome email because of putting this presentation together. And what I'm thinking about doing is having a picture of me painting plein air on the edge of either the beach or the marsh, or maybe even the rice fields, but something that is core to what I do. So I think that's a great idea, Mern. Sally, did I already explain how to do what? How to do what? So type into the chat roll. Let me know what you're asking about. The personalized email is your broadcast. Yes, I did talk about that. So when I'm talking about personalized email, I'm talking about every email that you send out, whether it's the broadcast email, your weekly broadcast email, or your welcome email, should be written as if it's one-to-one. You're sending one to everybody on your list, but it needs to read like it's one-to-one. So, good question. So that's all we've got time for today. Look for the replay coming up shortly with those PDFs. Sally, go back through and listen to the recording because that's exactly what we talked about in here. Talk with y'all next, I think almost next week. Coming up soon. Bye-bye for now.